What do you call a man with a spade on his head? Doug. What do you call a man without a spade on his head? Douglas. What do you call a woman with a tea tray on her head? Nana Amwatin. Sorry, no punchline for that one, just some pictures. Nana became a Newsnight star when she appeared in the background during my interview with the Health Minister, Caroline Flint. She told our editor that balancing a tray on her head's not that difficult, anyone could do it. So look out for game correspondents in need of a new trick. I'm Emily, this is the Newsnight video podcast. In recent weeks, Newsnight has been looking at the best public services in the world. This week we focused on prisons, in particular those of Denmark. The Danes lock up half as many people as we do in Britain, but manage to rehabilitate far more. Nick Pearce is director of IPPR. He used to advise David Blunkett, a man who of course prided himself on his toughness when he was in charge of the Home Office. We sent him to Denmark to check out their penal system.
This is Ringer Prison in Denmark. It's a high-security prison for people who've committed serious crimes. But there are only 86 prisoners here. It's the smallest prison in a country with a small prison population. Sentences are shorter. In Denmark, prison is the last resort, not the first option. But that doesn't make them soft on crime. Reoffending rates are lower. Here, it seems, you can punish people without brutalising them.
Marcus is the youngest person in the prison. His mum and dad are serving their time here together. He's allowed to stay with them until he's 3 years old. His mother Birgit and father Lesser live in this section with 10 other inmates, men and women. They share a communal kitchen and showers. It's the most sought-after wing on the prison. In Denmark, the guiding principle is that life in prison should be as close as possible to normal life, so prisoners have a daily routine of work and education. Hannah and Kenneth are another married couple in the unit. They are locked up separately at night, but they can spend the rest of their time together when they're not at work or studying. Marcus's parents take him to the front of the prison, where a taxi picks him up to go to a nursery in the local town. He'll spend until 3 o'clock there with other children. Lesser is confident that his son benefits from being with him in prison.
It's good for a child to have many people surrounding it and being kind and speaking to him.
And do you ever worry about the other people that he's in the unit with, or
no? Even the most violent and hardcore people inside becomes very loving, and it's actually helping the environment in here, making people settle down.
The prison governor explains that the inmates cook for themselves and get their food from a spa supermarket branch set up in the main building. Unlike British prisons, there's no central kitchen, so the prisoners come here twice a week to buy what they need. Almost all aspects of normal life have their place in Ringer Prison. After finishing work, most of the prisoners mill about on the wreck. Here, men and women are allowed to form relationships and can arrange private visits to each other's cells.
So it seems like taking the concept of a normal life too far to say you can have sex with each other.
Yeah, but if you have a long sentence, you have to do something, you know.
Some people are together for throughout their entire sentence and happy together. Others just for the sake, perhaps.
Ringer is on the island of Fyn in the middle of Denmark. It's built on a plateau with the prison walls sunk into the surrounding landscape. But the unassuming appearance disguises high-tech security. This may look like an open prison, but it's crisscrossed with surveillance devices. Denmark imprisons 77 people out of every 100,000. In Britain, it's twice that rate, 147 out of every 100,000. Denmark spends more per prison place, but for half as many people. Custodial sentences are also shorter for most crimes in Denmark. On average, they're half as long as in Britain, 6 months compared to 13 months. And whilst we have waiting lists for hospitals, Denmark has waiting lists for prisons. There's no such thing as bail, but once sentence is passed, if you're not a danger to the public, you wait at home until a prison place is ready for you. Only a handful of under-18s are held in Danish prisons. The rest are in social service units. People with mental health problems are diverted out of the prison system, and drug users now have a treatment guarantee. This is the backyard of a special unit in the prison for 12 inmates who've decided to try and give up their drugs habit.
It's like a tzatziki or something.
If they stay clean, they become eligible for early release. But if they take drugs, they get sent back to the main prison. When someone leaves Ringer at the end of their sentence, they're given a place to live, help to get a job or a grant to study. They don't leave prison until their local council has got all these lined up. The whole system is focused on reducing criminality, and here is the killer stat. Only 1 in 3 ex-cons re-offends within 2 years of leaving prison in Denmark, compared to 2 in 3 in Britain. Prison works in Denmark, but for the right reasons. But this is a country that holds some surprises.
Until 1970, liberal Denmark castrated serious sex offenders. In this building behind me, the Hersted Vester Institute, nearly 300 people were surgically castrated. Today, they practice a treatment for violent and repeat sexual offenders that combines psychotherapy with anti-hormonal injections. They believe it really works.
This is what stops production of testosterone in the body.
The treatment reduces testosterone to prepubescent levels. It's a form of chemical castration.
Every second week, so for every fortnight they need to take those ones.
Well, we have examined the clients receiving this treatment from 89 until 2000, and no one has relapsed into serious sexual crimes or violence.
In recent years, the Danish liberal model has come under increasing pressure. Stiffer sentences have been imposed for violent crimes. Prison numbers have gone up. And now 20% of Danish prisoners are foreign nationals in a country that's passed some of the most draconian immigration laws in Europe. But far from abandoning their liberal model, Denmark's conservative ministers argue in its defence, and even that they are improving it.
People who commit sex crimes are, I think, the people that most people find the most disgusting in the world. People who commit sex crimes against children. What is the smart thing to do? Put them to prison for 20 years, throw away the key, or treat them so that they do not commit new crimes once they get out? I think that the last thing is the smart thing to do.
Denmark deals firmly with dangerous people. It's tough on crime. But it's an egalitarian society that's tough on the causes of crime. It sends fewer people to prison, but rehabilitates more of them. It has much to teach us.
Nick Pearce and Newsnight's Best Public Services in the World series will culminate with a special debate chaired by Jeremy Paxman. Stay in touch with the website for details. He's been without a car for 4.5 months now, and Newsnight's ethical man's beginning to tire of walking everywhere. What to do? Visit his local bike shop.
Absolutely fine. It's a bit small, but a bigger version of this.
Bigger version would be perfect for you, but with a child seat on it, it's no good. The simple reason is when you kick your leg over the back, you're liable to kick the child in the face.
Yeah, no, I can see that.
That's right. So the ideal thing to do is to buy a ladies' bike, crossbar coming down like so, much easier to get on and off.
You think I need a lady's bike?
You're going to need a ladies' bicycle.
Is that
no, it's
sort
much
of the
safer
modern
for the child as well.
metrosexual thing,
Yeah,
is it?
fine, yeah.
Everyone can... Yeah. Well, every time I've complained about my car-free status, we always get hundreds of emails, well, tens of emails anyway, saying I should get one of these. And to be honest, I've been a bit reluctant to do that. And I'll tell you why. It's because the last time I owned a bike, this happened. I was knocked unconscious, lost my front teeth, and had a total of 40 stitches in my face. I came over the handlebars.
Some understandable reluctance then, but we can be cold-hearted at Newsnight. There was always going to be more to having Justin purchase a shiny new bike than just making his life a bit easier because we took his car away. Once upon a time, there was a national cycling proficiency test. You may have taken one yourself. Well, we found out that it's being revived. So we sent Justin off on his new wheels to earn his badges.
I'm going to be the very first person to do the brand spanking new Bikeability Award.
Everything we're going to talk about is how we minimise the risk of anything bad happening to you. So, for example, I can see you've tucked your trousers into your sock, so you've actually reduced your risk of getting, or in fact, why have you done that?
So that I don't get oil on my trousers. So I don't get the cuff of my trousers caught in the and dragged off the bike and pulled in front of a articulated
So
lorry.
you've reduced the risk by doing that.
The idea is to make sure you know the basic skills that'll keep you safe on the road, like swerving.
Well, I've actually observed you do all the level 1 skills. Is there anything that you've actually learnt from that? Maybe?
Yeah, no, there is. You know, the looking backwards,
yeah,
the swerving. Bikeability 1, the first ever badge. Now it's time to take to the road. David wants to make sure I can cycle confidently and can communicate with other road users. What I've learned from the on-road bit is, you know, taking a more dominant position on the road than I would have done before.
And what helps you do that? What actually dissipates any potential conflict?
The eye contact with the vehicles behind, and that's really good, and it does seem to work well, so you get much less kind of tension and aggression. You look back, they know you're there, and there you are in the dominant position on the road, so you've got much more control. Can I have my badge, please?
You can. I've observed you doing that, and because I've seen you doing it, you've done it really well. You've done all the level 2 drills. I think I can...
badge 2. Now it's junctions, roundabouts, traffic lights, overtaking, the tricky stuff. And in 3 hours, I've scored the hat trick. Green means go. Bikeability is encouraging children to get out of the playground and onto the road. So what do they make of the new award? Are you pissed off, Oscar, that I'm getting the badge, despite the fact that you've done the course a week before me?
Yeah, quite a bit, yeah.
You are a bit pissed
Yeah,
off.
very.
I'm sorry, you know, maybe I'll put it in the post and send it to you. But
Maybe you won't.
Maybe I won't, yeah. Oscar may be annoyed with this ethical man, but he's a very ethical boy.
I'll probably buy a car for if I need to go on a camping trip or something, but cycling I'll do around town because it's just so much quicker, apart from anything, than driving. And it's nicer because you get to know the community rather than just being you can't hear anything in a car, can you?
So now I need to get those stabilisers off and get Eva and Zola on 2 wheels too. Give them a few years and a bit of bikeability and they'll be ready to take to the road too.
Unless you've been hiding somewhere very remote indeed, you might well have heard about a bit of bother in the Labour Party. There's been infighting, backstabbing, letters, resignations and statements. Oh, and some cursory interest from the media. Tony and Gordon featured prominently in the programme on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday. On Thursday, we led on, well, just guess.
The first thing I'd like to do is to apologise, actually, on behalf of the Labour Party for the last week, which, with everything that's going on back here and in the world, has not been our finest hour, to be frank. But I think what is important now is that we understand that it's the interests of the country that come first and we move on. Now, as for my timing and date of departure, I would have preferred to do this in my own way, but as has been pretty obvious from what many of my cabinet colleagues have said earlier in the week. The next party conference in a couple of weeks will be my last party conference as party leader. Next TUC next week will be my last TUC, probably to the relief of both of us. I think it's important for the Labour Party to understand, and I think the majority of people in the party do understand, that it's the public that comes first and it's the country that matters, and we can't treat the public as irrelevant bystanders in a subject as important as who is their Prime Minister. So we should just bear that in mind in the way that we conduct ourselves in the time to come.
He'll be dropped off here and be met.
The Chancellor was due today to break his telling silence for the first time since going on paternity leave in July. Welcome to the UK Sports Games in Glasgow by the Olympic medalist Steve Redgrave and the Sports Minister Richard Cabourn. Us keen reporters carefully corralled in pens.
So is Mr Brown going to say anything?
He's not going to say anything when he arrives. He might say something later on, I really don't know.
So, a few words maybe, but at the end.
Does Tony Blair still have your full support, Mr Brown?
To our surprise, he answered that almost at once, speaking here an hour before Mr Blair.
We're in a unique situation in our country where the Prime Minister has said, as he has said on a number of occasions, that he does not want to lead our party and our government into the next general election. And of course, as a result of that, there are questions about what happens in the time to come. And it's right to say that I, like others, have had questions myself.
Interesting. He'd had questions, had he?
When I met the Prime Minister yesterday, I said to him, as I've said on many occasions to him, and I repeat today, that it is for him to make the decision. I said also to him, and I make clear again today, that I will support him in the decisions he makes, that this cannot and should not be about private arrangements, but what is in the best interests of our party, and most of all, the best interests of our country. And I will support him in doing exactly that.
Support, but one sensed a slight threat. Mr Blair's leaving date had to be in Labour's interests and Britain's. But had he won ground or backed down? He seemed to look pleased.
So he seemed in pretty cheerful mood?
Yeah, I think he was. He certainly was with us anyway.
Do you give him any lessons in rowing back?
I don't think I think he's been a bit of a rugby player in his time. I don't think he's had much chance of getting into a boat. But if he wanted a lesson, I'm sure I could give him a lesson.
Do you think there's an element of him rowing back?
I don't think there's no. I think that what he said was what he believed, and he said that, and that's what everybody else wants in the Labour Party, who's got an interest in the Labour Party and making sure that we have a Labour government. And as long as we can have an orderly handover, then I think that will be in the interest of the nation as well as in the interest of the country as well.
But listening to Mr Brown, you wouldn't have thought there'd been a row in Downing Street yesterday.
No, that's your opinion. That's your opinion. And obviously, as always, you're entitled to your opinion. I'm just giving mine, so don't try and put mine into yours, OK? Cheers.
2 hours after Mr Blair's statement, Gordon Brown's face again suggested he had in fact rowed forward.
Are you happy with what the Prime Minister said, Mr Brown? Chancellor, do we have a deal?
By now, he was in Edinburgh to meet the Labour members of the Scottish Parliament. Polls suggest that if Tony Blair's still in Downing Street come next May, many of these MSPs could lose their seats in the Scottish elections. But this evening, most seemed happy with what both men had said today. The chairman of the Labour MSPs tends towards the Brown camp.
The rest is private.
What do you think of Mr Blair's statement?
Mr Blair's statement this afternoon? Yes. I think he should be left to go on with it. I think you don't need a calculator to work out when he's going. He's in the last months of his premiership. We need to, as a party, put in place the processes that allow that to happen with some dignity for him, dignity for the party, and I look forward to that process to see who the next leader is going to be.
Do you hope the next leader is in place before your elections?
I don't think it matters. The election in Scotland is not about the future of Tony Blair, it's about the future of Scotland.
But one left-winger felt Mr Blair should still go quickly.
Given the resignations yesterday and all the speculation, I think what I would have expected is that Tony Blair would have gone sooner rather than later, perhaps at this year's party conference, and I think that would be much better for our forthcoming Scottish elections, because it just means that the speculation about a date is going to go on and on and on, and therefore it will be a distraction from talking about what Labour has achieved in the Scottish Parliament and what we want to achieve when elected again next May.
There's been no deal, say the Brown camp, and will be no deal. Talk of a co-premiership, they say, is rubbish.
Good day's work, Mr Brown. Good to see you.
But tonight, one of the Chancellor's main allies in Scotland was still saying the party needed to have its new leader by next May.
I think it's important that the public know before the elections in England and Wales and in Scotland next May about the future direction of the Labour Party, about the policies, about the priorities, and who will be the leader. And I think today's announcement gives the Prime Minister space to do that in his own time at some stage before then, and it also helps to bind the party together.
Tomorrow in Edinburgh, the Chancellor returns to one of his favourite themes, Britishness, preparing us, no doubt, for his premiership. A few yards from the Holyrood Parliament, this small court says it all.
What's looking increasingly likely now is that when the time comes, there'll be a leadership contest. Gordon Brown will not just pick up the keys to number 10. If he wins, though, what direction will the party take? Will there be a continuation of New Labour as we know it, or will we have to start getting used to Brownism? Here's Paul Mason.
Sometimes, especially on a day like today, you wish you could freeze frame the politics and focus on the policy. Because behind all this freneticness, there are serious issues being discussed about the future of Labour. And they amount to this. If you're going to take a market economy and direct it to social ends, is it better to do it from the top down or from the bottom up? That's the question Charles Clarke was trying to ask yesterday, but he got drowned out by the sound of Labour backstabbing.
It's true that some individuals are more cautious about reform than others. But I think there's a far more significant division, and that is the one between those reformers whom I would describe as traditional Fabians and those whom I would describe as social entrepreneurs. The description does have elements of caricature, but it also contains truths which explain some of the policy divisions which have dogged this government.
It's a fault line that goes back to the foundation of Labour. The party was shaped by social entrepreneurs, unions, co-ops. But when the original Fabians, Sidney and Beatrice Webb, decided Soviet Russia was a great place, the whole ideology of Labour changed. And now Labour's critics say it should change back.
I think what's interesting now at this particular juncture is that that kind of wave of public sector reform, which was about the centre handing it out, has kind of reached its limit, and there's a searching around for something that comes next. What happens next? Now, what I think is really fascinating is how that perhaps requires going back to the Labour Party roots, back in the self-help groups, the friendly societies, the cooperative movements, those amazing forms of community self-organisation in the 19th century, which had a kind of communal grassroots energy.
The old argument, Blair versus Brown, was not really about state versus market. It's about what do you do when the market can't provide a solution. Here, at Mr Brown's Treasury, they've tended to say, well, the state must provide. But next generation Blairism is tending to focus far more on grassroots solutions. This man is trying to write a whole new programme for Labour based on that. It's not ready yet.
The sorts of areas that we want to go down, though, is to look at policy making where economics isn't necessarily driving a very narrow economistic view of markets and consumption isn't driving everything, including public service reform. We need to look at environmentalism and how we balance, green growth and so on. We also need to think about how to improve people's quality of life, looking at mental health issues, and there's a very
lot of
wide...
that sounds a little bit like what David Cameron has already got his hands on.
Well, this is the interesting thing. I think he's got his finger on it, but not his hands.
Mr Cameron is no doubt rubbing his hands. As he makes great PR on a trip to India, his agenda is setting the priorities of left-wing think tanks.
I think New Labour has been a bit kind of torn. On the one hand, it does get the need to elicit kind of grassroots engagement in small social entrepreneurial type organisations. On the other hand, there's this anxiety about losing control, about the problem is that if it's not centralised, do we get a postcode lottery? The anxiety that you get patchy provision, that only the centre can actually ensure quality and uniformity.
The big defenders of the top-down, centre-out approach are the unions. Their policy wish list is short: scrap the anti-union laws, protect manufacturing, a new deal on pensions and higher minimum wage. It's an economic agenda, and, says Labour's power broker, they will listen to any leadership candidate who ticks these boxes.
This isn't just about personalities. Of course you want someone that can win, and experience does count. But at the end of the day, the policies that find favour with the members I'm privileged to represent and the majority of the voting British public is the key to keeping the Tories out.
Possibly the greatest policy challenge facing Labour is being faced here at the Ministry of Defence. Very few in the party or in the party's voting base express happiness at what it's got itself into, either in Iraq, Afghanistan or lately Lebanon. So what can the new leader do to renew policy short of troop withdrawal? Here's a clue from one of the war's severest critics.
A new leader will do what a new leader has to do, and he'll take those very difficult decisions as they materialise. But so long as we all know that at the end of the day these decisions are being taken in Britain's and only Britain's interests, I think people can live with that.
Even now, the policy scars over war run deeper than any argument over self-help versus centralism.
Paul Mason, that's about it. But if your appetite hasn't quite been satisfied, there's also our audio podcast to download and enjoy. Also, with yours truly. Bye-bye.